The last thing Martha had said to him was, "Don't let them turn you into something you're not, Thad." Now 6 years later, as Thaddeus Holloway stared at the photograph on his mantel, her laugh frozen in sepia, her eyes still bright with the hope that had died with her, he wondered if he'd already become exactly what she'd feared. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days, and the sound that shattered the mountain silence wasn't the wind. It was something else, something that made the hair on his neck stand up and his hand instinctively reach for the Winchester. He'd found those boot prints yesterday, circling his property like a predator testing its prey. Fresh prints deliberately placed where he'd see them. Someone had been watching him. At 41, Thaddeus Holloway had learned to trust his instincts. The war had taught him that survival depended on reading signs others missed, on hearing danger in the spaces between sounds. And right now, every instinct screamed that death was walking through the storm toward his door. The sound came again, a deliberate thud against the barn door. Not random, not accidental. Someone was out there, and they wanted him to know it. He pulled on his buffalo coat and stepped into the Maelstrom rifle in hand. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed through the knee-deep snow toward the barn. What he found there made his blood freeze. A girl, maybe 19, collapsed against the wooden door. Her auburn hair was crusted with ice, her dress torn and frozen stiff. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold when they fluttered open green as bottle glass filled with terror so pure it seemed to burn. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "They're coming. Don't let them find me." As he knelt beside her, Thad caught sight of something that made his pulse spike. More tracks in the snow, partially filled but still visible. Boot prints, horse hooves, the drag marks of something or someone being pulled through the drifts. This wasn't a random traveler caught in the storm. This was a hunting party, and they were close. "Who's coming?" he asked, but she'd already lost consciousness, her body going limp in his arms. He carried her toward the cabin, but with each step the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The storm provided cover, but it worked both ways. Somewhere out there, men were moving through the darkness, following tracks that led straight to his door. By the time he kicked open his cabin door, Thad had made a decision that would change everything. He was going to save this girl, no matter what it cost him. Because Martha had been right, he needed someone to save someone who still had a chance at the kind of life she'd never gotten to live. He just didn't know that salvation sometimes wore the face of damnation. The girl, who called herself Celeste Whitmore, had been unconscious for 2 days when she finally spoke the words that should have warned him. "You keep Martha's memory like a shrine, but you don't really know who killed her, do you?" Thad's hand froze on the coffee pot. He'd never mentioned Martha's name, never spoken of how she'd died. But somehow this stranger knew his deepest wound. "How do you know about Martha?" he asked quietly. "The same way I know you've been living half dead for 6 years. The same way I know you're still looking for someone to blame." Celeste struggled to sit up, her movements careful and calculated. "Men like you? You leave marks that someone like me can read. Someone like you, someone who's learned to survive by understanding pain." She was studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, cataloging his reactions like a gambler reading tells. There was something predatory in her gaze, something that didn't match the frightened victim he'd rescued. "Where are you from?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her makeshift bed. "Redemption Ridge. My father's Ezra Whitmore, the preacher there." Her voice carried the right notes of pain and resignation. 3 nights ago, Deputy Carson came to our house. Said he had questions about some stolen cattle, but that wasn't what he wanted. What did he want? Me. Said I'd been making eyes at him during church service, that I was asking for trouble walking around town without proper supervision. She pulled the blanket tighter. When I refused his advances, he said every man in town knew what kind of girl I was. The story was familiar, too familiar. It echoed Martha's tale of assault and abandonment, hitting every note that would resonate with his guilt and anger. but there was something rehearsed about it, something that felt almost performed. Did you tell your father? I tried. He said I must have done something to encourage Carson's attention. Said it was my fault for being vain, for not keeping my eyes down, like a proper Christian daughter. Her voice broke at exactly the right moment. He helped them drag me to the edge of town. Said I was no daughter of his. Them, Carson, my father, and 2 other men. They said I was corrupting the town's youth, that I needed to disappear before I led any more men into temptation. She met his eyes, and for a moment he saw something that didn't belong. Satisfaction quickly masked. They meant for me to die out there. But you made it to my door. I walked for hours before the storm hit. Kept thinking maybe I could find shelter, maybe someone would help. When I saw your cabin lights, she smiled, and it was beautiful and grateful and utterly convincing. I knew I was saved. They'll come looking for you. Maybe. But they expect to find me dead, frozen in the snow. They don't know about you, about the man who might be fool enough to help a stranger. The casual insult should have offended him, but instead it felt like honesty. There was something refreshing about her directness, her refusal to play the helpless victim, even while clearly needing help. What do you want from me? He asked. Sanctuary, until I can figure out what to do next. And then I disappear. Find a new town, a new life. I won't bring trouble to your door. It was a reasonable request, but something nagged at him. The way she'd known about Martha, the calculating intelligence behind her eyes, the fact that she'd collapsed at his door with almost supernatural timing. How did you know to come here? He asked. Stories. Traders talk about the hermit in the crazy mountains, the war hero who lost his wife and came here to die. Some say you're dangerous, others say you're just broken. She tilted her head, studying him. I was hoping you were both. Why? Because broken men want to be fixed, and dangerous men can protect what they value. The honesty was disarming, but it also revealed a mind that thought tactically, strategically. This wasn't just a frightened girl seeking shelter. This was someone who'd planned, calculated, chosen him specifically for reasons he didn't yet understand. There's something else, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Something I haven't told you about Carson. What? He's killed before. Other girls who rejected him, who tried to tell people what he'd done. They all died in accidents, falls, drownings, sudden illnesses. But I know the truth. How? Because I was friends with one of them. Mary Stevens from Silver Fork. She came to me after Carson attacked her, asked what she should do. I told her to report it, to trust the law. Her voice hardened. They found her body in the river 3 days later. Jesus. Carson doesn't just hurt women. He eliminates them when they become inconvenient. That's why I ran, not because I was ashamed, but because I was next. The story was chilling, but it also felt crafted, designed to provoke exactly the response she was getting. Every detail pushed his buttons, appealed to his need for justice, his guilt over failing Martha. What makes you think I can help? Because you're not like other men. You've seen real evil, real corruption. You know what it looks like when the law protects the guilty and abandons the innocent. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. And because you need this as much as I do. I need what? A chance to save someone. A chance to be the man you were before the world broke you. The words hit him like a physical blow. She was right. He did need this, needed to feel useful, needed to believe he could still make a difference. But the fact that she understood his psychology so completely was both attractive and terrifying. I'll help you, he said finally. But we do this my way. No unnecessary risks, no heroics. We figure out who's protecting Carson and how to stop him. Agreed. But Thad, she used his nickname as if they'd known each other for years. When the time comes, don't hesitate. Men like Carson don't change. They just find new victims. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, but the danger was far from over. Somewhere in the mountains, men were planning their next move, deciding whether to wait for better weather or risk the journey to his cabin. As Celeste settled back into her blankets, Thad caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It was appreciative, calculating, and oddly satisfied, as if everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. But whose plan? And what was the endgame? The questions would have to wait. Right now, he had a woman to protect and enemies to prepare for. The fact that he was no longer sure which was which would have to be dealt with later. The storm broke on the fourth morning, revealing a world transformed by 3 feet of fresh snow and the kind of crystalline silence that made every sound carry for miles. Thad woke to find Celeste already up, moving around the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd made herself at home. "A coffee's ready," she said without looking up from the bacon she was frying. "And I found some cornbread flour in your stores. Thought you might like a proper breakfast for once." "You don't have to. I want to earn my keep." She turned to face him, and he was struck by how much she'd changed in just 4 days. The terrified girl was gone, replaced by someone who moved with quiet confidence. Besides, when's the last time you had a meal that wasn't hardtack and beans? The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Thad had been surviving rather than living, going through the motions of existence without joy or purpose. Having someone care about his comfort was a luxury he'd forgotten existed. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said, accepting the coffee she offered. "Clear weather means travel's possible again." "You mean it's time for me to move on?" "I mean it's time for us to decide what we're really doing here." She set down her cup, her expression serious. "What do you want to do?" "I want to understand what we're up against. Carson's not working alone. Someone's protecting him, enabling him. If we're going to stop him, we need to know who. And how do we find that out? By going to the source. There's a trading post about 30 miles from here run by a man named Dutch Henderson. He knows everyone hears everything. If there's corruption in the territory, he'll know about it. That's a long ride in winter. It's a necessary ride, unless you'd rather spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Celeste was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "There's something else I need to tell you, about the night Carson attacked me." "What about it?" "I wasn't completely helpless. I fought back, gave him something to remember me by." She touched her cheek where faint scratches were barely visible. "But I also took something from him. A letter he was carrying, correspondence that might be important." "What kind of correspondence?" "I don't know. It was sealed, addressed to someone in Silver Fork. But the handwriting looked official government issue." She reached into her coat and produced a crumpled envelope. "I thought it might be useful." Thad examined the letter, noting the quality of the paper and the formal script. The address was to a Judge Morrison in Silver Fork, but there was no return address, no indication of who'd sent it. "We should open it," he said. "I already did." Her smile was sheepish. "I was curious." She handed him the letter, and as he read, his blood ran cold. It was an order to dismiss charges against a man named Bradley Hayes, who'd been accused of assault in 3 separate incidents. The signature was illegible, but the letterhead was unmistakable: United States Senate. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "What is it?" "Corruption. High-level corruption. Someone in the federal government is protecting a serial rapist." "Who's Bradley Hayes?" "I don't know. But whoever he is, he's got powerful friends." Thad folded the letter carefully. "This changes everything. We're not just dealing with a corrupt deputy. We're dealing with a conspiracy that reaches all the way to Washington. What do? We get this to Dutch Henderson. He'll know what to make of it, who to trust with the information. Thad stood moving to the window. But we need to be careful. If they're willing to kill to protect this secret, they won't hesitate to kill us too. They're already trying to kill me. Now they're trying to kill both of us. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats outside. Multiple riders moving at a steady pace through the snow. Thad grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. 3 men on horseback picking their way carefully through the drifts. One wore a deputy's badge, his face bearing fresh scratches that matched the marks on Celeste's cheek. Another was older, dressed in the severe black of a preacher. The third was a professional, someone who made his living with violence. "Carson," Celeste whispered, joining him at the window. "The old man is my father. I don't know the third one. He hired gun," Thad said grimly, "which means they're not here to talk. What do we do?" "You hide in the root cellar. Stay quiet no matter what happens. If they find you..." He handed her a pistol. "Use this." "What about you?" "I'm going to try to convince them you're not here. And if that doesn't work, you'll fight." "I'll fight." She hesitated, then stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "For luck," she said softly. As she disappeared into the root cellar, Thad checked his rifle and stepped out onto the porch. The 3 men had stopped in a rough semicircle, their horses stamping nervously in the snow. "Morning, gentlemen," he called out. "Hell of a storm we just had." "Thaddeus Holloway." The deputy said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About my daughter." The preacher's voice was strained, desperate. "She's been missing for 4 days. We're hoping she might have sought shelter here. Haven't seen anyone. Been snowed in since Monday." The third man, the professional, shifted in his saddle. "Name's Briggs. I track things for money. My dogs picked up her scent leading this way. Dogs can be wrong. Not these dogs." A sound from inside the cabin, deliberate, unmistakable, made all 3 men tense. Footsteps, the creak of floorboards, the clink of metal on metal. "Sounds like someone's in there," Carson observed. "Just me," Thad said quickly, knocked over some tools getting dressed. But it was too late. The damage was done. Carson's hand had moved to his weapon, and Briggs was already dismounting with predatory grace. "Why don't we take a look inside?" Carson suggested. "Just to be sure." "Can't let you do that. Man's got a right to privacy in his own home. Not when he's harboring a fugitive." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Thad felt his finger tighten on the trigger, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What makes you think she's a fugitive?" "Theft, assault, seduction of a minor." Carson's smile was cold. "She's wanted for questioning in connection with several crimes." "That's interesting, because I found something that might interest you." Thad pulled out the letter, keeping his rifle trained on the men. "Correspondence between your boss and Judge Morrison about protecting a man named Bradley Hayes." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Carson's face went white and Briggs stopped moving entirely. Even the preacher looked shocked. "Where did you get that?" Carson demanded. "From a dead man, along with some other interesting documents." Thad was improvising, but their reactions told him he'd hit something vital. Documents that might be very embarrassing to certain powerful people. "You're lying." "Am I then? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Carson's hand moved to his pistol, but Thad was ready. His rifle cracked and the deputy spun from his saddle, blood spraying from his shoulder. The man hit the ground hard, cursing and clutching his wounded arm. "Your next shot goes center mass," Thad warned, working the bolt action. "Your choice." But Briggs was already moving, using his horse's cover while he drew his weapon. The preacher was screaming something about sin and damnation, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You shot a lawman," Ezra Whitmore shouted. "That's murder." "That's self-defense," Thad replied, swinging his rifle toward Briggs. He drew first. The hired gun was almost to the cabin now, close enough to rush the porch. Thad had seconds to decide, wound him or kill him. The choice was taken from him when Briggs raised his pistol. Thad's shot took him in the chest, spinning him around. But the man was tough. He stayed on his feet, returning fire with deadly accuracy. The bullet whined past Thad's ear, close enough to burn. "Celeste," Thad called out. "Whatever happens, stay hidden." But she was already moving. The root cellar door burst open, and she emerged with the pistol in her hand, firing at Briggs with surprising accuracy. Her first shot missed, but the second caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. "I told you to stay hidden," Thad shouted. "Let you die, I don't think so." Briggs was down, but not out, crawling toward his fallen weapon. Thad put another bullet into the ground beside his hand, and the man froze. "It's over," Thad said. "You lost." "This isn't over." Carson gasped from his position in the snow. "This will never be over. You have no idea what you've started." "Then enlighten me." "The letter, it's nothing. A distraction. The real power behind this operation. You'll never find them. They're too smart, too well connected. We'll see about that." Carson struggled to his feet, his face gray with pain and blood loss. "You think you're heroes? You're just pawns in a game you don't understand." "Maybe. But we're alive and your friend there isn't." Briggs had gone still, his blood spreading across the white snow. The preacher was unconscious, having fainted when the shooting started. Only Carson remained wounded, but defiant. "Take your friend and get out of here," Thad said, "before I change my mind about letting you live." "What about the girl? What about her?" "She's coming with us. She's my daughter and she's under my protection." "She's under my protection now, and unlike you, I actually mean it." Carson looked at Celeste, who was standing beside Thad with the pistol still in her hand. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition that spoke of shared secrets. "You don't know what you're protecting," Carson said quietly. "You don't know what she really is. I know she's someone who deserves better than what you gave her." Does she, or is she exactly what she appears to be? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Thad looked at Celeste, seeing something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, a coldness, a calculation that didn't match her role as frightened victim. "Get out," he said firmly, "before I kill you too." Carson managed to mount his horse, though the effort left him swaying with weakness. "This isn't over, Holloway. Not by a long shot. Yes, it is, because if I see you again, you're dead." The deputy spurred his horse forward, leading his unconscious companion away from the cabin. Within minutes, they disappeared into the forest, leaving only tracks and bloodstains in the snow. "Are you all right?" Thad asked, turning to Celeste. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." She was looking at Briggs's body with an expression that made him uncomfortable. "One less predator in the world. You've killed before." It wasn't a question, and she didn't try to deny it. "When necessary. When there was no other choice. How many times? Does it matter? They were all men who deserved to die." The casual way she said it sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't the frightened girl he'd rescued from the storm. This was someone else entirely. Someone who killed without remorse, who saw violence as a tool rather than a last resort. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm exactly who I said I was. Celeste Whitmore, daughter of Ezra Whitmore, victim of Deputy Carson's abuse." Her smile was sharp as a blade. "The only difference is what I left out." "What did you leave out?" "That I'm very good at surviving. And that sometimes survival requires difficult choices. Like manipulating a broken hermit into protecting you. Like using every resource at my disposal to achieve justice." She stepped closer, her eyes intense. "Carson is a killer, Thad. He's hurt dozens of women, and he'll hurt dozens more if he's not stopped. I'm offering you the chance to stop him. By becoming like him, by becoming what the situation requires. The answer was both honest and terrifying. Thad realized he was standing at a crossroads. He could turn away from this woman and her dangerous agenda, or he could embrace the darkness she offered. The choice would define not just his future, but his soul. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to help me destroy the men who think they can hurt women with impunity. I want you to help me bring real justice to this territory." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I want you to help me kill them all." The request hung between them like a contract written in blood. Thad looked at this woman who'd appeared in his life like an answer to prayer and wondered if she was salvation or damnation. Maybe he thought there wasn't much difference. The abandoned mine outside Silver Fork had been carved into the mountain by Chinese laborers 20 years earlier, part of a silver boom that had lasted exactly 18 months before the vein played out. Now it was a maze of tunnels and chambers, the perfect place for a clandestine meeting or an ambush. Thad and Celeste had ridden hard for 2 days to reach Dutch Henderson's trading post, only to find it burned to the ground. The old man's body was nowhere to be found, but the message was clear. Someone was eliminating potential witnesses, covering their tracks with systematic precision. "This is where Dutch said to meet if there was trouble," Celeste said, checking her pistol as they approached the mine entrance. "He said the tunnels were too complex for anyone to navigate without a guide." "He also said he'd be here," Thad replied. "But Dutch is either dead or on the run." "Then we're on our own." "We've been on our own since this started." They entered the mine carefully, using an oil lamp to navigate the treacherous passages. The air was stale and cold, filled with the smell of dust and decay. Somewhere in the darkness, water dripped steadily against stone. There, Celeste pointed to a side passage. "That's where Dutch said he'd wait." They followed the tunnel deeper into the mountain, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The passage opened into a large chamber, its ceiling supported by rotting timber. In the center of the room, a figure sat tied to a chair. "Dutch," Thad called out, rushing forward. But as they got closer, the lamplight revealed the truth. It wasn't Dutch Henderson in the chair. It was a stranger, a man with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. He was unconscious, his head lolling forward. "It's a trap," Celeste whispered. "I know." Thad raised his rifle, scanning the shadows. "The question is who said it?" "That would be me," a voice said from the darkness. Marshal Kane stepped into the light, his badge glinting in the lamplight. Behind him came 3 more men, all armed, all moving with the precision of professionals. "Marshal," Thad said carefully, "what brings you to an abandoned mine? Looking for fugitives, murderers, people who've been causing trouble in my territory." Kane's smile was cold. "Imagine my surprise when I heard about the shooting at your cabin." "Self-defense. Carson drew first." "That's not how I heard it. I heard you ambushed 3 men who were conducting a legal search for a missing girl." "What girl?" "Celeste Whitmore, daughter of Preacher Whitmore. Wanted for questioning in connection with several thefts and a suspected murder." "That's a lie," Celeste said, stepping forward. "I'm the victim here." Are you Catherine Walsh, confidence woman and suspected killer?" Kane produced a wanted poster from his coat. "Face matches perfectly." Thad stared at the poster, his mind reeling. The woman in the drawing was definitely Celeste, but the name was different. The crimes were different. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling. "You're lying," he said. "MI check the dates. Catherine Walsh was operating in Denver 6 months ago. Celeste Whitmore supposedly lived in Redemption Ridge her entire life. Can't be both places at once." "Unless," Celeste said quietly, "you're very good at creating false identities." The admission hit Thad like a physical blow. She'd just confirmed Kane's accusation, admitted to being someone else entirely. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm someone who's been tracking corruption in this territory for 2 years. Someone who's been building a case against the men who think they're above the law." She looked at Kane with contempt. Including certain federal marshals who take bribes to look the other way. That's a serious accusation, Kane said. Can you prove it? I can prove you've been taking money from Senator Hayes to protect his son. I can prove you've been covering up murders, suppressing evidence, intimidating witnesses. Her voice was deadly calm. I can prove you're as corrupt as the men you're supposed to be arresting. Even if that were true, it wouldn't change what you are. A killer, a liar, a woman who destroys innocent men for money. Innocent men. Celeste laughed bitterly. Is that what you call them? The corrupt sheriffs, the crooked judges, the businessmen who buy their way out of justice. They were all innocent. Some of them were. Some of them were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like Dutch Henderson, Dutch was getting too close to the truth. He had to be eliminated. The casual admission sent a chill through the mine. Kane had just confessed to murder, and he didn't seem to care who heard it. Where is he? Thad demanded. Safe, for now. But his safety depends on your cooperation. What do you want? I want you to kill her. Kane nodded toward Celeste. Right here, right now. Make it look like a crime of passion. You discovered she was lying to you. You snapped, you shot her. And if I refuse, then you both die, and I blame it on a falling out between partners. Either way, the problem is solved. What about Dutch? If you cooperate, he lives. If you don't, he dies with you. The offer hung in the air like a sword. Thad looked at Celeste, seeing the woman who'd lied to him, manipulated him, used him as a weapon. But he also saw the woman who'd fought beside him, who'd saved his life at the cabin. I need a minute to think, he said. You have 30 seconds. Thad. Celeste said quietly, whatever you decide, I understand. I know what I've done, what I am. If my death saves Dutch. Shut up. I'm serious. I've made peace with dying. I just want to know that it meant something. It won't mean anything if I kill you for these bastards. Then don't kill me for them. Kill me for justice, for all the innocent people I've hurt. Jesus Christ, Celeste, I'm not going to... My name is Catherine Walsh. I'm a professional killer who's been masquerading as a victim to manipulate good men into doing terrible things. I deserve to die. The words hit him like bullets. She was confirming everything Kane had said. But there was something in her eyes, something that didn't match her words. Time's up, Kane announced. What's it going to be? Thad raised his rifle, pointing it at Celeste. She stood perfectly still, her eyes never leaving his face. For a moment, he thought he saw her nod almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know, she replied. Do it. He pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the mine, deafeningly loud in the confined space. Celeste cried out and fell backward, clutching her side. Blood spread across her shirt, dark and convincing. Well done, Kane said approvingly. Now we can all go home. But Thad wasn't finished. He worked the bolt action and swung the rifle toward Kane. No. Now you're all going to die. The marshal's eyes widened in shock. What? Did you really think I'd murder an innocent woman for you? Did you really think I was that broken? She's not innocent. Neither are you. Thad's first shot took Kane in the chest, spinning him around. The other men scrambled for cover, but Thad was already moving, using the mine's layout to his advantage. He'd studied the tunnels while they talked, memorized the exits and hiding places. Celeste, he called out. Can you move? I'm fine, she called back. Grazed my ribs, but I'm mobile. Then get out of here, I'll hold them off. But she wasn't retreating. She was moving forward, the pistol in her hand, barking as she engaged the remaining men. Her shot was true, professional, deadly. 2 more men went down in quick succession. Behind you, she shouted. Thad spun around to see the last gunman raising his rifle. He fired without aiming, trusting to instinct and luck. The bullet caught the man in the throat, dropping him instantly. Suddenly, the mine was quiet, except for the sound of their breathing and the steady drip of water. 4 men lay dead in the chamber, their blood mixing with the dirt and dust. "Are you really all right?" Thad asked, moving to Celeste's side. "I'm fine. You barely grazed me." She smiled, and it was warm and genuine. "Thank you for trusting me." "I didn't trust you. I trusted myself." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And I know I'm not a murderer, no matter what you've done. Even knowing what I am, what I've been. Especially knowing that. Because if someone like you can be redeemed, then maybe there's hope for the rest of us." The sound of footsteps in the tunnel made them both freeze. Someone was coming, moving carefully through the darkness. Thad raised his rifle, but a familiar voice called out, "Easy there, son. It's just me." Dutch Henderson emerged from the shadows, his face grim but relieved. "Sorry I'm late. Had to wait for the right moment." "Dutch, we thought you were dead." "I was supposed to be. But I've been playing dead for 2 days, waiting for these bastards to make their move." He looked at the bodies scattered around the chamber. "Looks like you didn't need my help after all." "We need to get out of here," Celeste said. "There'll be more coming." "Not here, but there's something you need to know." Dutch's expression was serious. Kane wasn't the head of this operation. He was just a foot soldier. "Then who?" "Senator Hayes. He's been running a network of corrupt officials across the territory, using them to cover up his son's crimes. Kane was just one piece of the puzzle. His son, Bradley Hayes. He's the one behind the murders, the assaults, all of it. He's been operating under different names, moving from town to town, always staying one step ahead of the law." "Where is he now?" "That's the problem. He's coming here, to Silver Fork. Kane was supposed to eliminate you two, then help Bradley take control of the territorial government." "When?" "Tomorrow. There's a territorial legislature meeting all the important officials in one place. Bradley plans to eliminate the reformers and install his own people. Then we stop him. How he's got an army of hired guns plus the backing of federal authorities. We're 3 people against an entire conspiracy. Maybe, but we've got something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth, and the will to die for it." Dutch looked at them both, the broken hermit who'd found his purpose, and the killer who'd found her conscience, and slowly nodded. "All right then, let's go to war." The Silver Fork Territorial Building was a fortress of corruption, disguised as a temple of justice. 3 stories of red brick and marble. It housed the territorial legislature, the Supreme Court, and the offices of every major official in Montana Territory. Tomorrow they would all be gathered in one place for the quarterly session, making it the perfect target for someone who wanted to reshape the government in a single stroke. Thad crouched on the roof of the building across the street, studying the layout through field glasses. Beside him, Celeste was sketching defensive positions and escape routes with the precision of a military engineer. Dutch had positioned himself at the town's telegraph office, monitoring communications and watching for signs of Bradley Hayes' approach. 20 guards visible, Thad reported. All armed, all positioned to control access points. They're not just protecting the legislators, they're prepared to eliminate them. "I count at least 30 more inside," Celeste added. "Probably more hidden in the surrounding buildings. This isn't just an assassination, it's a coup." "How do we stop it?" "We don't, we let it happen." Thad looked at her sharply. "What?" "I think about it. If we try to warn the authorities who do, we warn half of them are probably working for Hayes. If we try to stop the attack, we'll be outgunned and outnumbered. But if we let it begin, then we're in the chaos with them. We can identify the traitors, eliminate the real threats, and save the people worth saving. It's dangerous. It's the only way. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life running from these people." She was right, and Thad knew it. They'd been reacting to threats always one step behind their enemies. It was time to go on the offensive. "What's the plan?" We get inside before the attack begins. Position ourselves where we can do the most good when the shooting starts. And we hope we're fast enough to save the people who matter. And if we're not, then we die trying. It was a simple plan, which made it both elegant and terrifying. They would infiltrate the building, identify the key players, and try to preserve some semblance of legitimate government, while eliminating the corruption that had taken root. "There's something else," Celeste said quietly. "Something I need to tell you before we do this." "What?" "My real name isn't Catherine Walsh. It's Catherine Hayes." The words hit Thad like a physical blow. "You're his daughter." "I'm his daughter, and I'm the only person who knows all his secrets, all his plans, all his weaknesses." Jesus Christ. I've been hunting him for 2 years, building a case against him and his network. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone with military training, someone who could fight when the time came. So you manipulated me. I recruited you. The same way the Army recruits soldiers, by appealing to your sense of duty, your desire to serve something greater than yourself. By lying to me. By giving you a cause worth fighting for. Does it matter that the details were false if the mission was real? Thad stared at her, seeing the woman who'd been both his salvation and his damnation. She'd used him, manipulated him, turned him into a weapon. But she'd also shown him a purpose, a reason to live beyond mere survival. Why tell me now? Because you deserve to know the truth before you die for it. And because I need you to understand what we're really fighting for. What are we fighting for? Justice. Real justice, not the corrupted version that's been poisoning this territory. My father has been using federal authority to protect a network of killers and rapists. He's turned the law into a weapon against the innocent. And you want to stop him. I want to destroy him, completely, permanently, without the possibility of appeal or redemption. I want to make sure he can never hurt anyone again. Even if it means destroying yourself in the process, especially then. The intensity in her voice was frightening. This wasn't just about justice. It was about revenge, about a daughter's hatred for a father who'd failed her in every possible way. "What did he do to you?" Thad asked. "What didn't he do? He sold me to his allies when I was 16, called it political networking. He covered up Bradley's crimes, made me an accessory to murder. He turned me into a weapon and aimed me at innocent people." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He destroyed my capacity for love, for trust, for anything resembling a normal human relationship. But you're trying to change that. I'm trying to die for something that matters. It's the closest I can come to redemption. You don't have to die." "Yes, I do. Because I'm as guilty as he is. I've killed innocent people, destroyed families, perpetuated the very corruption I'm now trying to eliminate. The only way to balance the scales is with my life. Catherine, promise me something. When this is over, when my father is dead, promise me you'll find a way to live. Really live, not just survive. Find someone to love, someone to build a life with. Don't let my poisoned legacy destroy your future." "I promise." "Good. Now let's go save the territory." They made their way down from the roof, moving through the pre-dawn darkness toward the territorial building. The streets were empty, except for the occasional patrol, but they could feel the tension in the air. Something was building something that would change everything. As they approached the building, Thad noticed something that made his blood run cold. The guards weren't just positioned to control access, they were positioned to prevent escape. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a massacre. "They're going to kill everyone," he whispered. "I know. That's why we have to stop them." They slipped through a service entrance, using Catherine's knowledge of the building's layout to avoid the main security checkpoints. The interior was a maze of corridors and offices, but she guided them with the confidence of someone who'd studied every blueprint. "The main session hall is on the 2nd floor," she whispered. "That's where they'll make their move." But there are smaller meeting rooms throughout the building. They'll hit those too. Make sure no one survives to tell the story. How do we cover it all? We don't. We focus on the main hall, try to save as many as we can. The rest, she shrugged, the rest is in God's hands. They reached the second floor just as the first delegates were arriving for the morning session. Thad recognized several faces, reform-minded legislators, honest judges, officials who'd been fighting corruption in their own jurisdictions. Good people who had no idea they were walking into a trap. There, Catherine pointed to a man in an expensive suit who was greeting the delegates with practiced charm. That's Senator Hayes, my father. Thad studied the man who'd orchestrated so much suffering. He was handsome, distinguished, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. But there was something cold in his eyes, something that spoke of a man who valued power over people. And that's Bradley. Catherine continued, indicating a younger man who was positioning himself near the main entrance. My dear brother, the serial killer. Bradley Hayes was his father's son in every way, handsome, charming, and utterly without conscience. He was checking his watch, waiting for something, waiting for the signal to begin the slaughter. When do they move? Thad asked. Soon. They're waiting for all the targets to be in position. Once the session begins, they'll seal the exits and start killing. Then we need to be ready. We are ready. The question is whether we're good enough. The delegates were filing into the main hall, now taking their seats for what they believed would be a routine legislative session. They had no idea that most of them would be dead within the hour. Thad, Catherine said quietly, whatever happens in there, I want you to know. Don't make this about us. Make it about them. He nodded toward the innocent people filing into the hall. They're counting on us even if they don't know it. You're right, let's go save some lives. They moved toward the main hall, weapons ready, hearts racing. In a few minutes, the shooting would begin. The only question was whether they could stop enough of it to matter. As they took their positions, Thad thought about Martha, about the promise he'd made to her memory. He was finally fighting for something that mattered, finally using his skills to protect the innocent instead of just surviving. It was a good way to die. The session hall was packed with the territory's most powerful men when the first shot rang out. Thad had positioned himself in the gallery, Catherine near the main entrance, both of them ready to act when the massacre began. But the signal came from an unexpected source. A young woman in the gallery who suddenly stood up and fired a pistol into the air. "Attention," she shouted. "This session is now under federal jurisdiction. Anyone who moves will be shot." The delegates erupted in chaos, some diving for cover, others standing in confusion. But Thad's attention was fixed on the woman who'd fired the shot. She was young, maybe 25, with auburn hair and green eyes that seemed familiar. "That's Rebecca Hayes," Catherine whispered from across the room. "Bradley's wife. What the hell is she doing?" The answer came quickly. More gunmen emerged from hidden positions throughout the hall, their weapons trained on the delegates. But instead of firing, they began herding the officials toward the exits. "This is not an execution," Rebecca Hayes announced. "This is a controlled evacuation. Everyone will be transferred to a secure location for their own protection." "Protection from what?" one of the delegates demanded. "From the corrupt officials who've been selling out this territory to foreign interests. From the network of criminals who've been using federal authority to cover up their crimes." Thad felt his blood run cold. This wasn't the massacre they'd expected. It was something else entirely. A carefully orchestrated operation that looked like a rescue, but felt like a trap. "Move," Rebecca commanded. "Everyone out now." The delegates began filing toward the exits, but Thad noticed something that made his pulse spike. The gunmen weren't just escorting them, they were separating them, dividing the group into smaller clusters. Some were being led toward the main entrance, others toward service exits. "Catherine," he called out softly. "They're splitting them up." "I see it." Different destinations, different fates. Who lives and who dies? We're about to find out. Senator Hayes had been standing near the podium, but now he moved toward his daughter-in-law with obvious confusion. "Rebecca, what's the meaning of this? We had a plan." The plan changed. Her voice was cold professional. "Your son's operation has been compromised. We're implementing contingency protocols." "What contingency protocols?" "The ones that ensure the survival of the Hayes family political dynasty, even if it means sacrificing some of our current allies." The meaning was clear. Rebecca Hayes wasn't just Bradley's wife, she was the operational commander of the entire conspiracy. And she was cutting loose anyone who'd become a liability. "You can't be serious," Senator Hayes said. "These men are our supporters, our allies. These men are witnesses to crimes that could destroy us all. Some of them will be relocated with new identities. Others," she shrugged, "others will have tragic accidents." "You're talking about murder." "I'm talking about survival. Your son's reckless behavior has exposed us all. Now we clean up the mess and start over." Thad was beginning to understand the scope of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a territorial corruption scandal, it was a multi-generational conspiracy that had been planned and executed over decades. The Hayes family had been systematically infiltrating and corrupting the Western territories, building a shadow government that answered to no one but them. "Where's Bradley?" Catherine whispered. "Good question." Thad scanned the room but didn't see the younger Hayes anywhere. "He should be here. Unless he's already dead." The possibility hit them both at the same time. Rebecca Hayes wasn't just eliminating witnesses, she was eliminating competitors. Her own husband might be the first casualty of the new order she was implementing. "We need to move," Catherine said, "before they finish sorting everyone out." "What's the plan?" "We follow the group that's being marked for death, try to save who we can." "And Rebecca, she's mine. I've been waiting 2 years for this moment." They began moving through the chaos, using the confusion to mask their approach. The delegates were being herded toward 3 different exits, each group accompanied by armed guards. Thad tried to identify the pattern to figure out who was being saved and who was being eliminated. There, Catherine pointed to a group of about 20 men being led toward the basement. "Those are the reformers, the ones who've been fighting corruption. They're being taken to die." "Then that's where we're going." They followed the group down a service stairway, staying far enough back to avoid detection. The basement was a maze of storage rooms and mechanical equipment perfect for disposing of bodies without detection. "This is it," one of the guards said as they reached a large storage room. "Everyone inside." "What's this about?" demanded Judge Morrison, one of the reform leaders. "We demand an explanation." "You'll get one," the guard replied, "right after you get inside." But Morrison wasn't moving. The old judge had sensed something wrong and he was preparing to resist. "I'm not going anywhere until I know what's happening." "You're going to die," the guard said simply. "That's what's happening." The words galvanized the other delegates. Some tried to run, others attempted to fight. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. The massacre was beginning. Thad's rifle cracked and the first guard dropped. Catherine's pistol barked twice, taking down 2 more. But there were too many of them, and the delegates were caught in the crossfire. "Everyone down," Thad shouted. "Get down and stay down." The battle was fierce but brief. The guards were professionals, but they'd been caught off guard by the sudden resistance. Within minutes, most of them were dead or wounded. "Is everyone all right?" Catherine called out. "We're alive," Judge Morrison replied. "Thanks to you. But who are you? Why are you helping us?" "We're the people who've been trying to expose this conspiracy for 2 years," Catherine said. "And we're running out of time." "What conspiracy?" "The systematic corruption of the territorial government by the Hayes family." They've been using federal authority to cover up murders, protect criminals, and eliminate anyone who threatens their power. That's impossible. Senator Hayes is a respected reformer. Senator Hayes is the head of the conspiracy, and his daughter-in-law is currently eliminating witnesses upstairs. The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. They'd been betrayed not just by their enemies, but by people they'd trusted, people they'd considered allies. "What do we do?" Morrison asked. "We get you out of here," Thad said. "All of you, before they realize what happened down here. And then we expose the truth. All of it. The murders, the corruption, the cover-ups. We make sure the world knows what the Hayes family has been doing. They'll kill us. They're already trying to kill you. The only question is whether you die quietly or fighting back." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all freeze. Someone was coming, moving quickly through the basement. Thad raised his rifle, but the figure that appeared wasn't another guard. It was Dutch Henderson, his face grim but determined. "We need to move," he said without preamble. "Rebecca Hayes has realized what happened down here. She's sending more men." "How many?" "Too many. We need to get these people out of here before they arrive." "Where can we go?" "I know a place, but it means trusting me, and I know that's not easy right now." "Why should we trust you?" Judge Morrison demanded. "Because I'm the man who's been building the case against the Hayes family for 3 years. Because I'm the one who recruited Catherine to infiltrate their organization. And because I'm the only one who knows how to get you out of here alive." The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. "You're my handler. You've been running me all along. I'm sorry for the deception, but it was necessary. The Hayes family has informants everywhere. I couldn't risk exposing the operation." "What operation?" "A joint investigation by the territorial government and the Federal Marshal's Service. We've been building a case against the Hayes family for years, but we needed someone on the inside to gather evidence. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. A professional killer with a personal vendetta against the targets. You were perfect for the job." The truth was devastating. Catherine had thought she was working alone, pursuing a personal mission of revenge. But she'd been a federal agent all along, manipulated by people who understood her psychology as well as the Hayes family had. "So none of this was real," she said quietly. "My mission, my choices, my relationship with Thad, it was all part of some government operation. The mission was real. The danger was real. The choice to risk your life for these people, that's real too. But I was never in control. I was just another asset being managed by my superiors. You were a weapon, but weapons can choose their targets." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of gunfire from upstairs. The final phase of the operation was beginning, and they were running out of time. "We need to go," Dutch said. "Now." "Where?" "Someplace safe. Someplace where we can regroup and figure out our next move." "What about Rebecca Hayes?" "She's already gone. Disappeared with her core team and a substantial amount of federal funds. She's cutting her losses and starting over somewhere else." "And the conspiracy. Unwounded but not dead. The Hayes family has been operating for decades. They'll adapt, rebuild, find new ways to corrupt the system." "Then we haven't won." "No. But we haven't lost either. We've exposed part of the truth, saved some good people, and disrupted their operations. Sometimes that's all you can do." As they prepared to leave the basement, Catherine looked at Thad with an expression he couldn't read. She'd been manipulated by everyone, her father, her brother, her handler, even him. But she'd also chosen to fight for something greater than herself. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we disappear. New identities, new lives, new missions. The war against corruption never ends. It just moves to different battlefields. And us? There is no us. There never was. We were just 2 damaged people who found each other in the middle of a war. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it is." They left the basement together, But Thad knew they were already saying goodbye. The mission was over, but the war would continue. And in wars like this, there were no happy endings, only the hope that the next battle would be fought by someone else. The safe house was a cabin in the Bitterroot Mountains, 40 miles from Silver Fork, and accessible only by a trail that hadn't been used since the Indian Wars. Dutch had led them there through back country that seemed designed to break horses and men alike. But it was the kind of place where someone could disappear completely. The rescued delegates had been relocated to various towns throughout the territory, given new identities and instructions to stay quiet until the investigation was complete. But Thad, Catherine, and Dutch remained together, bound by shared secrets and the knowledge that their war was far from over. The Hayes family has been operating for 3 generations, Dutch explained as they sat around the cabin's fireplace. Started with Senator Hayes's grandfather, who came west after the Civil War and began systematically corrupting territorial governments. By the time William Hayes inherited the operation, it was a multi-million-dollar enterprise. What kind of enterprise? Catherine asked. Land speculation, mining rights, railroad contracts, anything that required government approval they controlled. They'd identify key officials, compromise them through blackmail or bribery, then use them to facilitate illegal business deals. And when officials couldn't be bought, they were eliminated, made to look like accident suicides or the work of outlaws. The Hayes family was very good at making problems disappear. What about Bradley? Thad asked. Where does he fit in? Bradley was the enforcement arm. He'd seduce women connected to target officials, then use the relationships to gather blackmail material. When that didn't work, he'd escalate to assault, then murder. And Rebecca. Rebecca was the strategic planner. She identified targets, coordinated operations, managed the network of corrupt officials. In many ways, she was more dangerous than her husband. They're both dead. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Catherine sat up straighter, her face pale. What do you mean dead? I mean they were found this morning in a hotel room in Butte. Apparent murder-suicide. Bradley shot his wife, then turned the gun on himself. That's impossible. Rebecca was in complete control. She was in control until someone more powerful decided she wasn't. The Hayes family has always been part of a larger organization, Catherine. They weren't the top of the pyramid, they were middle management. Who's at the top? That's what we need to find out. Because whoever it is, they've just eliminated the only witnesses who could have exposed them. The implications were staggering. They'd been fighting what they thought was a territorial corruption scandal, but it was actually part of a national conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. So what do we do? Thad asked. We keep investigating. We follow the money track, the connections, build a case against the people who were really running the operation. And if they try to kill us, then we kill them first. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats outside. Multiple riders approaching fast. Dutch grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Company, he announced. 6 riders all armed. The Hayes people? Catherine asked. Doesn't matter. Anyone who finds this place is a threat. They took positions around the cabin, weapons ready. The riders were close enough now that Thad could see their faces, hard men with the look of professional killers. Federal marshals, one of them called out. We're here to arrest Catherine Hayes for murder and conspiracy. Catherine Hayes. Dutch looked confused. I thought your name was Catherine Walsh. It is. Hayes is my married name. She smiled grimly. I forgot to mention that I'm Bradley's wife, not his sister. The revelation hit Thad like a physical blow. Everything he'd thought he knew about Catherine, about her relationship to the Hayes family, had been another lie. You're his wife. I was his wife. He's dead now, which makes me a widow, and apparently a wanted fugitive. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd never trust me if you knew I was married to a serial killer, even if I was trying to bring him to justice. You were married to the man who killed Martha. I was married to the man who killed dozens of women. Martha was just one of many. The casual way she said it made Thad's blood run cold. This woman had been living with a monster, sleeping beside him, sharing his bed while he planned and executed murders. "How could you stand it?" he asked. "I couldn't. That's why I became a federal agent. That's why I've been trying to bring him down. And now he's dead. Now he's dead, and I'm being framed for his murder, along with Rebecca's." The marshals were getting impatient. "Come out with your hands up. We know you're in there." "What do we do?" Thad asked. "We fight," Dutch replied. "Because if they take Catherine alive, she'll never make it to trial." "There's another option," Catherine said quietly. "I could surrender, face the charges, tell the truth in court. They'll kill you before you can testify. Maybe. But at least the truth would be on record. At least people would know what really happened." "No." Thad's voice was firm. "No one else dies for this. We fight our way out. We disappear. We start over somewhere else. And spend the rest of our lives running, if that's what it takes." The marshals were losing patience. "Last chance, come out, or we come in." "Your choice," Dutch said. "Fight or flight." Catherine looked at Thad, seeing the determination in his eyes. "You'd really do that? Give up everything to help me escape?" "I'd do anything to keep you alive. Even knowing what I am, what I've done. Especially knowing that. Because you're trying to be better than what you were. And if I can't be better, then we'll be damned together." The first marshal reached the cabin door just as Dutch opened fire. The battle was fierce, but brief, and the marshals were skilled, but they were fighting on unfamiliar ground against opponents who had nothing to lose. When the smoke cleared, 4 marshals were dead and 2 had fled. The cabin was riddled with bullet holes, but all 3 defenders were alive. "That's it," Dutch said. "We're burned. This location is compromised. Where do we go?" "Nowhere. We make our stand here. Against how many? However many they send. Because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives running from shadows." "There's another alternative," Catherine said. "I could turn myself in, face the charges, expose the truth in court. They'll never let you live that long. Maybe not. But I have to try. Because if I don't, other women will die. Other families will be destroyed. The corruption will continue." "Then we all go," Thad said. "Together. We turn ourselves in together, demand a public trial, make sure the truth comes out." "That's suicide. Maybe. But it's the right kind of suicide. The kind that means something." Dutch looked at them both, seeing the resolution in their faces. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." "Then we'd better make sure we have enough evidence to make it stick. Because if we're going to die for the truth, we'd better make sure the truth is worth dying for." They spent the next hour going through the evidence Dutch had collected over 3 years of investigation. Financial records, correspondence, witness statements. Everything needed to expose the Hayes family conspiracy and the larger organization behind it. "It's not enough," Catherine said finally. "We can prove the Hayes family was corrupt, but we can't prove who was giving them orders." "Then we make them reveal themselves," Thad said. "We force them to show their hand." "How?" "By becoming too dangerous to ignore. By making so much noise that they have to come out of hiding to silence us. That's incredibly risky. Everything we've done has been risky. At least this way we're taking the fight to them instead of running from it." As they prepared to leave the cabin, Catherine looked at Thad with an expression he couldn't read. "You know this is probably goodbye," she said. "Once we get to Silver Fork, once we start making accusations, we'll be targets. They'll try to separate us, isolate us, eliminate us one by one. Then we don't let them separate us. Thad, I mean it. Whatever happens, we stay together. We live together or die together, but we don't face this alone. You realize what you're saying? You're willing to die for someone you've known for less than 2 weeks. I'm willing to die for someone who's shown me what real courage looks like. Someone who's risked everything to fight for justice. even if that someone is a killer, especially then. Because killers understand the cost of violence. They understand what we're really fighting for. They left the cabin together, riding toward Silver Fork and an uncertain future. Behind them, the safe house burned, consuming the last traces of their temporary sanctuary. Ahead lay a town full of enemies, a corrupt system that would try to destroy them, and the slim hope that truth might triumph over power. It was a good day to die for something that mattered. The Silver Fork courthouse was a fortress under siege. Every window was barred, every entrance guarded, and snipers positioned on surrounding rooftops. Word had spread throughout the territory that Catherine Hayes was prepared to testify against the conspiracy that had corrupted the Western Territories for decades, and powerful people were determined to ensure she never reached the witness stand. Thad sat in the defendant's chair, shackled and surrounded by federal marshals. Beside him, Catherine waited with the calm resignation of someone who'd accepted her fate. The packed courtroom buzzed with tension. Journalists, federal agents, territorial officials, and ordinary citizens who'd traveled hundreds of miles to witness what might be the trial of the century. The territorial court is now in session, announced Judge Harrison, a federal appointee who'd been brought in specifically for this case. We are here to determine the charges against Catherine Hayes née Walsh for conspiracy murder and treason against the United States. The charges were staggering, but everyone knew the real trial was about something bigger. This was about whether the truth could survive in a system designed to protect the powerful and silence the weak. Your Honor, said the prosecution led by federal prosecutor James Mitchell, the government will prove that the defendant is a professional killer who's been operating across the Western Territories for 3 years, eliminating federal officials and corrupting the territorial government. Your Honor, replied the defense attorney, a young man named Collins, who'd volunteered to represent Catherine despite death threats. The defense will prove that my client is a federal agent who's been working undercover to expose the very corruption she's accused of perpetuating. The opening statements were interrupted by a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The doors burst open, and Rebecca Hayes entered under heavy guard. She was supposed to be dead. Dutch had confirmed her murder-suicide with her husband. But here she was alive and ready to testify. I apologize for the delay, she announced. But I have crucial testimony that will clarify the defendant's real role in this conspiracy. The courtroom erupted in confused murmurs. Judge Harrison banged his gavel for order. Mrs. Hayes, you were reported dead. How do you explain your presence here? I faked my death to escape the very conspiracy that's now trying to frame Catherine Hayes. I'm here to tell the truth about what really happened. And what truth is that? That Catherine Hayes is innocent of the charges against her. That she's been working as a federal agent to expose the corruption that's been poisoning the territorial government. Your Honor, Mitchell interrupted. This is highly irregular. We have no advance notice of this witness, no opportunity to verify her claims. The claims can be verified. Rebecca replied calmly. I have documents, recordings, evidence that proves Catherine's innocence and exposes the real conspiracy. She produced a leather portfolio from her coat, thick with documents and photographs. 3 years ago, Catherine Hayes approached federal authorities with information about her husband's criminal activities. She was recruited to work undercover gathering evidence against the Hayes family and their associates. That's impossible, Mitchell protested. We have no record of such an operation. Because it was classified, authorized at the highest levels of government known only to a select few. Rebecca's smile was cold. I should know. I helped design it. The revelation hit the courtroom like a bomb. Rebecca Hayes, the woman they'd thought was the mastermind behind the conspiracy, was actually a federal agent. You're lying, Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Think about it, Catherine. How did you think you were so successful at infiltrating the Hayes organization? How did you think you were able to gather so much evidence without being detected? I was careful, I was smart. You were guided, every step of the way. Your handler, your missions, your targets, they were all part of a larger operation designed to bring down the Hayes family from within. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me, Catherine, who recruited you, who trained you, who gave you the resources and support to operate across multiple territories. Catherine's face was pale, but her voice remained steady. I recruited myself. I trained myself. I operated alone. Did you, or did you have help? You didn't recognize support systems you took for granted. Information sources that seemed too convenient to be coincidence. The questions were devastating, because they were true. Catherine had always wondered how she'd been so successful, how she'd avoided detection for so long. But she'd attributed it to skill and luck, not to a larger conspiracy designed to protect her. What are you saying? Judge Harrison asked. I'm saying that Catherine Hayes has been a federal agent for 3 years, that every person she killed, every operation she conducted was authorized by federal authorities, that she's being prosecuted for crimes she committed in service to her country. Your Honor. Mitchell stood up, his face flushed with anger. This is preposterous. We have no record of any such operation. No authorization, no oversight, no chain of command. Because it was classified above your level, Rebecca replied. This operation was run by people who understood that sometimes the law has to be bent to serve justice. Vigilante justice is not justice. Neither is a system that protects serial killers and corrupt officials. Sometimes you have to work outside the system to preserve the system. That's not how the law works. The law works however the people in power decide it works. And right now, the people in power want Catherine Hayes to disappear. The courtroom was in chaos with spectators shouting questions and demands. Judge Harrison banged his gavel repeatedly, but the noise was deafening. Order, I will have order in this court. But order was the last thing anyone wanted. The truth was coming out, and it was messier and more complicated than anyone had imagined. Mrs. Hayes. Judge Harrison said finally, do you have documentation to support these claims? I have everything. Financial records showing payments to Catherine from federal accounts. Mission briefings detailing her assignments. Correspondence with her handlers. Everything needed to prove she was acting under federal authority. Then presented. Rebecca opened the portfolio and began spreading documents across the defense table. Bank records, government letterheads, sealed orders, evidence that painted a picture of a vast federal operation designed to clean up territorial corruption through extrajudicial means. This is the authorization for Operation Frontier Justice, she said, holding up a document with multiple official signatures. A classified federal program designed to eliminate corruption in the Western Territories through targeted assassinations and evidence gathering. Targeted assassinations. Judge Harrison looked horrified. The federal government authorized murder. The federal government authorized the elimination of individuals who were too well connected to prosecute through normal channels. Corrupt officials, serial killers, organized crime leaders, people who were poisoning the territories and couldn't be touched by conventional law enforcement. And Catherine Hayes was the primary operative. Catherine Hayes was one of several operatives. But she was the most effective, which is why she's being scapegoated now that the operation has been exposed. Scapegoated by whom? By the same federal officials who authorized the operation. They want to distance themselves from the program, make it look like the work of rogue agents instead of sanctioned federal policy. Mitchell was on his feet again. Your Honor, even if these documents are authentic, they don't change the fact that the defendant committed murder. Federal authorization doesn't make killing legal, doesn't it? Rebecca's smile was sharp. Federal agents kill people all the time. In war, in law enforcement operations, in the defense of national security. The only difference here is that Congress wasn't briefed on the details. Because what you're describing is illegal, what I'm describing is necessary. The territorial governments were completely corrupted, Mitchell. Local law enforcement couldn't be trusted. Federal courts were compromised. The only way to restore order was through direct action. Vigilante action? Federal action. Authorized, funded, and overseen by people who understood that sometimes the ends justify the means. The argument was interrupted by gunfire outside the courthouse. Multiple shots followed by screams and the sound of running feet. Something was happening in the street, something that made the federal marshals reach for their weapons. "What's going on out there?" Judge Harrison demanded. An attempt to silence the only witness who can expose the truth. Rebecca replied calmly. "I told you powerful people want this testimony suppressed." Who wants it suppressed? The same people who authorized Operation Frontier Justice. The same people who are now trying to cover up their involvement by eliminating everyone who knows about it. More gunfire, closer this time. The marshals were positioning themselves around the courtroom, preparing for an assault. Through the windows, Thad could see armed men moving into position around the building. "Your Honor," Collins said urgently, "I request that this trial be moved to a secure federal facility. My client's life is in danger." From whom? From the people she was trying to expose. The real conspiracy behind the territorial corruption. And who might that be? Rebecca stood up, her face grim. The Congressional Oversight Committee that's been funding territorial development. They've been using federal money to buy land rights, mining claims, and railroad contracts. The Hayes family was just their enforcement arm. You're talking about members of Congress. I'm talking about a cabal of senators and representatives who've been treating the Western Territories like their personal piggy bank. They authorized Operation Frontier Justice to eliminate anyone who threatened their profits. And now they're trying to eliminate the operation itself, along with everyone who knows about it. The courthouse windows exploded inward as sharpshooters opened fire from the surrounding buildings. Glass showered the courtroom as spectators dove for cover. The federal marshals returned fire, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. "Everyone down," Thad shouted, pulling Catherine to the floor behind the defendant's table. "This is what I was talking about," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "They can't let the truth come out. Too many powerful people would fall. Then we make sure it comes out anyway. How we're trapped in here with a dozen federal marshals against what sounds like an army. We fight. We hold them off long enough for the truth to spread. The truth about what Rebecca's story is as much a lie as everything else. I was never a federal agent, Thad. I was exactly what I told you, a killer seeking revenge against the people who destroyed my life." "Then why is she protecting you?" "Because she needs a scapegoat. Someone to take the blame for the conspiracy while the real perpetrators escape." "What conspiracy?" "The one she's really part of." Rebecca Hayes isn't a federal agent. She's the mastermind behind the entire operation. She's been using federal resources to eliminate her family's enemies while building her own power base. The truth hit Thad like a physical blow. Rebecca Hayes wasn't trying to save Catherine. She was trying to use her. The documents, the testimony, the dramatic revelation, it was all theater designed to confuse the real issues. So who do we trust? No one. We trust no one and fight everyone. The battle for the courthouse was intensifying. The attackers had breached the lower floors and were fighting their way upstairs. But they weren't just trying to kill Catherine. They were trying to eliminate everyone in the courtroom, all the witnesses to Rebecca's testimony. "Your Honor," Rebecca called out over the gunfire, "I have one more piece of evidence. Something that will expose the real conspiracy." "What evidence?" "The names of every congressional official involved in the territorial land grab. Banking records showing illegal payments. Correspondence proving federal authorization for murder." She pulled out a final document. But before she could present it, a sniper's bullet took her in the chest. She fell backward, blood spreading across her white dress, the document fluttering to the floor. "Rebecca," Catherine called out, crawling toward the fallen woman. "Don't trust anyone." Rebecca gasped. "The conspiracy goes higher than you know. Who's behind it? Check the document, everything you need." She died with her eyes open, staring at the courthouse ceiling. Catherine grabbed the document she'd been trying to present, scanning it quickly. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "What is it?" A list of names. Congressional officials, federal judges, territorial administrators. All of them taking money from the same source. What source? The Union Pacific Railroad. They've been buying the territorial government to secure land rights for the transcontinental expansion. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. This wasn't just about territorial corruption or family conspiracies. It was about the largest infrastructure project in American history and the billions of dollars in federal land grants that came with it. The railroad needs secure passage through the territories. Catherine continued. They've been eliminating anyone who might interfere with their plans, environmentalists, Indian rights advocates, local landowners who won't sell. And the Hayes family were hired guns, enforcers for the railroad interests. They eliminated obstacles and intimidated opposition. And you, I was another obstacle, someone who knew too much about their operations. The attackers had reached the courtroom level. Thad could hear them in the corridor preparing for the final assault. In minutes, they'd breach the main doors and eliminate everyone inside. "We need to get this information out," Catherine said, clutching the document. "People need to know what's really happening. How we're trapped. The reporters. Some of them are still alive, still taking notes. If we can keep them alive long enough to file their stories, then the truth gets out. Some of it. Maybe enough to make a difference." The courthouse doors exploded open and armed men poured into the room. But they weren't dressed like federal agents or territorial lawmen. They were wearing the uniforms of railroad security, and their weapons were military grade. "Everyone stay down," the lead gunman shouted. "We're here to secure federal evidence." "What evidence?" Judge Harrison demanded. "Documents related to Operation Frontier Justice. Congressional authorization for the program has been revoked. All materials are now classified. You can't just... We can do whatever's necessary to protect national security." The gunman began collecting documents from Rebecca's portfolio, but Catherine had hidden the crucial list in her dress. If she could keep it concealed long enough. "Search her," the lead gunman ordered. "She's got something." "I don't have anything," Catherine said. "Search her anyway." Two men approached Catherine, but Thad moved to intercept them. "You're not searching anyone without a warrant." "We don't need a warrant. This is a matter of national security. This is a matter of railroad profits." The words hung in the air like an accusation. The lead gunman's expression hardened. "What did you say?" "I said this is about railroad profits. You're not federal agents, you're railroad security. And you're here to cover up your employer's crimes." "That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious crime." The standoff stretched like a taut wire. Everyone in the courtroom understood that they were witnessing something historic, the moment when corporate power openly challenged legal authority. The question was whether anyone would live to report it. "Kill them all," the lead gunman said finally. "Make it look like a terrorist attack." "Wait," Catherine said, standing slowly. "I'll give you what you want. Just let the others live." Catherine, "No," Thad warned. "It's over, Thad. We lost. The least I can do is save some innocent lives." She pulled the document from her dress and held it out. "Everything you need is right here. Names, dates, financial records, proof of the railroad conspiracy. Thank you for your cooperation." The gunman took the document, then raised his pistol. "Now die." But Catherine was already moving. The pistol she'd concealed in her other hand fired twice, taking down the lead gunman and his lieutenant. Chaos erupted as the remaining railroad men opened fire. "Everyone down," Thad shouted, grabbing his own weapon from a fallen marshal. The battle was fierce, but brief. When the smoke cleared, most of the railroad security team was dead. But so were half the spectators, including several reporters who'd been documenting the trial. "Is it over?" Judge Harrison asked from behind his overturned bench. "No," Catherine replied, clutching a bleeding wound in her shoulder. "It's just beginning. The document I gave them was a fake. I've still got the real list. Then we need to get it to people who can use it. Like who the federal government is compromised. The territorial administration is corrupt. The railroad owns half of Congress. Then we take it to the newspapers. Let the people decide what to do with the truth. If we can reach them, we'll reach them, all of us together. We'll make sure this story gets told." As they prepared to leave the battle-scarred courthouse, Thad looked at Catherine with an expression she couldn't read. "You know, this changes everything," he said. "I know. We'll never be safe. They'll hunt us for the rest of our lives." "I know that too. Then why did you save the list? Why not just let them have it and walk away? Because some things are more important than safety. Some truths are worth dying for. Even if it means spending our lives running from shadows. Especially then. Because if we don't fight them, who will?" They left the courthouse together, carrying the evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful conspiracies in American history. Behind them, the courtroom burned, consuming the last traces of the old corruption. Ahead lay an uncertain future, but for the first time in years, it was a future worth fighting for. The war against corruption had claimed many casualties, but it was far from over. And as long as people like Catherine and Thad were willing to fight, there was hope that truth might eventually triumph over power. The San Francisco Chronicle ran the story on its front page 3 days later. "Railroad conspiracy exposed. Federal documents reveal systematic corruption in Western territories." Within hours, newspapers across the country were picking up the story, reprinting the evidence that Catherine had smuggled out of the Silver Fork courthouse. Thad read the article in a Denver hotel room, while Catherine slept fitfully in the bed beside him. Her shoulder wound was healing but slowly, and the constant travel wasn't helping. They'd been moving every day since the courthouse battle, staying ahead of the railroad security teams that were hunting them. "It's working," he said when she woke up. "The story's spreading. Congress is calling for investigations. The railroad stock price has collapsed." "What about the names on the list?" 3 senators have resigned. A federal judge has been arrested. The territorial administrator for Montana has disappeared. And us, still wanted, still hunted, but at least now people know why. Catherine sat up carefully, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. "How long do we keep running? Until it's safe to stop. Or until we're too tired to keep going." "I'm already too tired. Then we stop. Here in Denver. We find a place to hole up and wait for the heat to die down. What if it never dies down? Then we make a new life anyway. New names, new identities, new purpose. What purpose? The conspiracies expose, the guilty are being prosecuted. What's left to fight for? The next conspiracy. The next corruption. There's always another war to fight, Catherine. The question is whether we want to keep fighting it." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the hotel window at the bustling street below. Denver was a boom town, full of opportunity and possibility. A place where 2 fugitives could disappear into the crowd and start over. "I've been thinking about something Rebecca said," she finally said. "About federal authorization for murder. About the ends justifying the means." "What about it?" She was right, wasn't she? Sometimes you have to break the law to serve justice. Sometimes the system is so corrupt that working within it just perpetuates the corruption. Maybe, but that's a dangerous road to go down. More dangerous than letting evil triumph because good people are too law-abiding to stop it. I don't know. But I know that once you start deciding who lives and who dies, it's hard to stop. It changes you, makes you into something you never meant to be. Is that what happened to me? I think that's what happened to all of us. The Hayes family, the railroad executives, the federal officials, they all started out thinking they were serving a greater good. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what's the answer? I think the answer is what we just did. Expose the truth and let the people decide. Democracy is messy and imperfect, but it's better than the alternatives. Even when the people make bad decisions, especially then, because at least they're their decisions to make. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Thad grabbed his pistol while Catherine moved to the window, checking for escape routes. "Who is it?" Thad called out. "Federal Marshal, I need to speak with you." "We're not interested in speaking with federal marshals. Even one who has a pardon from the president." The words stopped Thad cold. A presidential pardon meant the highest levels of government were involved, which could be either salvation or a trap. "Slide it under the door," he said. "I can't. It's not a document, it's a message. From someone who wants to thank you for your service to the country." "What service?" "Exposing the railroad conspiracy. Saving the territorial government from complete corruption. Preserving democracy in the Western Territories. We broke about a dozen federal laws doing that. Sometimes breaking bad laws is the highest form of patriotism." "Who sent you?" "Someone who understands that sometimes federal agents have to work outside the system to preserve the system. Someone who's prepared to offer you official positions with the Justice Department." Catherine looked at Thad with raised eyebrows. "Official positions? Investigating corruption, exposing conspiracies, fighting the kind of systemic evil that ordinary law enforcement can't touch. You'd have federal authority, unlimited resources, and the backing of the highest levels of government. In exchange for what? For doing what you've already been doing, fighting corruption wherever you find it. And if we refuse, then you keep running. Forever. Because there are still people who want you dead, and I can't protect you unless you're working for me." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. Official sanction for their war against corruption, but also the kind of institutional entanglement that had destroyed the Hayes family. "We need time to think about it," Thad said. "You have 1 hour. After that, my protection expires, and you're on your own." The marshal's footsteps receded down the hallway, leaving them alone with their decision. Work within the system they just exposed as corrupt, or continue their fugitive existence. "What do you think?" Catherine asked. "I think it's a trap. Once we're federal agents, we'll be subject to federal oversight. They'll control our missions, our targets, our methods. We'll become part of the system we've been fighting. But we'll also have the resources to fight bigger conspiracies. Access to information, legal authority, backup when we need it. And handlers who'll make sure we never get too close to the real power. We'll be allowed to fight the symptoms, but never the disease. Maybe that's enough. Maybe fighting the symptoms is better than fighting nothing at all. Or maybe it's just another form of control." They spent the next hour debating the offer, weighing freedom against security, independence against effectiveness. Both options had costs, both had benefits. The question was, which price they were willing to pay. When the hour was up, they had their answer. 1 year later, Thad stood on the platform of the Helena train station, watching passengers disembark from the eastbound express. Somewhere in that crowd was Catherine returning from her first official mission as a federal investigator. 3 months in Chicago working undercover to expose a municipal corruption ring that reached into the mayor's office. They'd accepted the Justice Department's offer, but on their own terms. No handlers, no oversight, no restrictions on their methods. They would investigate whatever cases they chose, wherever those cases led them. In exchange, They would provide the federal government with evidence against the kind of systemic corruption that threatened American democracy. It had been a good year. 12 major investigations, 7 corrupt officials prosecuted, 3 criminal conspiracies exposed. The work was dangerous and often thankless, but it was meaningful in a way that neither of them had experienced before. Thad. Catherine's voice cut through the crowd noise. She was walking toward him with a confident stride, no longer the broken woman he'd rescued from the snow. Her official badge gleamed on her coat, symbol of the authority she'd earned through sacrifice and dedication. "How did it go?" he asked, embracing her carefully. "Better than expected. The mayor's in federal custody along with half his administration. The city's going to need new elections, but at least they'll be honest ones. And you?" "I'm tired but satisfied, ready for the next case." "About that." Thad pulled a telegram from his pocket. "We've got a new assignment. Territorial corruption in Wyoming. Railroad interests buying judges, intimidating witnesses, eliminating competition." Sounds familiar. Different railroad, same tactics. Apparently, the Union Pacific wasn't the only company using murder to secure land rights. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow. Unless you'd rather take some time off, rest up from the Chicago operation." "Rest is for people who don't have a mission." Her smile was sharp, predatory. "I'll never get tired of hunting corrupt officials. Even if it means spending our lives on the road, never settling down, never having a normal relationship. This is our relationship, Thad. This work, this mission, this war against corruption. It's what brought us together, and it's what keeps us together. And if one of us doesn't come back from a mission, then the other keeps fighting. Until there are no more conspiracies to expose, no more innocent people to protect. That could take forever. Then we'll fight forever." They walked through Helena's main street, past the rebuilt courthouse, where honest judges now presided over fair trials. The town was thriving under the new territorial administration, free from the corruption that had poisoned it for decades. "There's something else," Catherine said as they reached their hotel. "Something I discovered in Chicago that I didn't put in my official report." "What?" "Evidence of a national conspiracy. Bigger than the railroad corruption, bigger than the Hayes family network. A shadow organization that's been manipulating American politics for decades. Who's behind it? That's what we need to find out. But Thad, this could be the biggest case of our careers. The kind that either makes us heroes or gets us killed. Both, probably. Are you ready for that? I've been ready since the night I found you in the snow. The question is whether the country is ready for the truth. We'll find out." As they entered the hotel, Catherine pulled out a leather portfolio filled with documents and photographs. Evidence of crimes that reached into the highest levels of American government conspiracies that threatened the very foundation of democracy. "One more case," she said. "One more war against corruption. And then we'll see if there's anything left worth saving." The sun was setting over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley, carrying passengers toward uncertain destinations. But Thad and Catherine weren't passengers anymore. They were conductors, choosing their own direction, fighting their own battles. The war against corruption would never truly end, but at least now they were winning some of the battles. And sometimes in a world where evil often triumphed through superior organization, that was enough. As they climbed the hotel stairs, Thad thought about Martha, about the promise he'd made to her memory. He was finally living instead of just surviving, finally fighting for something that mattered. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the life he'd chosen. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. But as they reached their room, Catherine suddenly stopped her hand on the door handle. "Thad," she said quietly. "We're not alone." Through the keyhole, lamplight was visible. Someone was waiting for them inside someone who'd been confident enough of their arrival to make themselves comfortable. Friend or enemy? Thad whispered, drawing his pistol. In our line of work, is there a difference? They opened the door together, weapons ready, prepared for whatever waited inside. The war against corruption had claimed many casualties, but it had also forged an unbreakable partnership between two people who'd found their purpose in fighting impossible odds. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and in the flickering lamplight of the hotel room, a figure waited in the shadows, holding documents that would change everything they thought they knew about their mission, their enemies, and themselves. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.